Hello and welcome to Comms Life by APCO Worldwide. I'm your host, Tom Billinghurst. Every week, we take a deep dive into the topics and trends shaping the communications industry and beyond. In the time it takes to introduce this episode, roughly 60 seconds, there will be up to 180 new startups around the world. That's 3 per second. And within 5 years, nearly 50% of all of them will have been scrapped, thrown on the slush pile of great ideas that could have changed the world if conditions were different. Such is the current entrepreneurial climate of today. So where's our sudden obsession with startup culture come from? And given such a plethora of new businesses, how do you communicate your unique solution and value proposition to stand out from the crowd? Joining us to discuss these questions and more is Karin Gabriel, project lead at the Dubai Future Accelerators, an initiative of the Dubai Future Foundation that brings startups together with government entities and private sector organizations to co-create a solution to the biggest challenges of tomorrow. Karin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
So Karin, we're going to talk about startups, we're going to talk about the role that DFA plays, and we're going to talk about how we communicate this startup culture to stand out from the crowd. But personally for you yourself, how did your interest in startups and connecting businesses, where's that come from?
I primarily work with emerging tech startups, and I've always had a passion for technology, already starting at university. I remember one of my majors was around, the subject was called business and internet, which back then, that was years ago, was
it's
something.
A broad topic, that.
Yeah. It was very brand new because we were analyzing the business model of Facebook and Google and YouTube, which back then wasn't really that obvious and common knowledge. And then I joined Microsoft working on the launch of Windows Phone, which again, back then was really exciting. And I then left Austria, went to India, joined a French company, which was focused on connecting businesses, primarily established businesses, from Europe, Canada, and the US with emerging markets such as the GCC and India. And so this business introduction has always been kind of like in my professional life. And when I joined Dubai Future Foundation 3 years ago, when it started, this is where I really got introduced into the startup world. And I luckily have seen the ecosystem develop quite a lot in Dubai in the past 3 years.
This experience of the wider world and 3 very different markets, how does that inform your day-to-day of connecting startups from around the world to Dubai?
I think on the one hand side, it makes me more open-minded, and I can more emphasize and understand where certain people are coming from. You know, the great part about Dubai Future Accelerators is that we get to meet so many people. In the last 3 years, so our 7th cohort, we have welcomed 255 startups from 37 countries. Those are more than 800 people.
And so what you do in your day-to-day is bring all of these people from all of these different backgrounds, from India, Estonia, the UK, the US, to name just a few of the recent companies that have been through Dubai Future Accelerators. But for anyone that's unacquainted or unfamiliar with the work that DFA does, could you just give us like a very top line layman's explanation of what you guys do?
Absolutely. Dubai Future Accelerators is a program that connects startups, scale-ups, entrepreneurs from all around the world with government organizations, but also private sector organizations in Dubai or the wider UAE. And our program is based on specific demands, and we call these demands challenges. For example, the Roads and Transport Authority, the Dubai Health Authority, the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority would outline projects where they're willing to invite startups and scale-ups from around the world to propose the solutions to then realize these projects.
So straight off the bat, you're bringing startups and government entities together. It wasn't so long ago, and it's changing ever so slightly, that they were 2 completely polar opposite concepts. How have you found bringing those 2 together? What challenges did you have in merging the 2 and getting them to sit down in the same room? There must have been some odd looks from government entities looking at scruffy jeans and polo shirt startups to begin with.
Absolutely. I mean, looking back, remembering our first cohort, government entities usually start their workday at some of them even at 7:30, anywhere between 7:30 and 8:30. So of course they were in the office at that time. But our startups were not in the office at 8 or 8:30. They came in at maybe 10, 10:30 in their flip-flops and shorts and t-shirts because, hey, it's Dubai and it's warm. And just around the corner, there's actually a Starbucks cafe. So of course they had their Starbucks coffee. It was like in a movie, very typical. And then they kind of like strolled in. And the first question that the government entities would ask them is, whom can we call and who can verify that, product works? Do you have any reference? Who are your biggest clients? Questions you would ask any regular company you would interview for, buying the solutions. But these startups didn't have this. Some of them have, of course, had track records, but with smaller partners, and others had an MVP, but no clients yet.
You yourselves, the project leads and the teams that are bringing the startups to Dubai, this communications process sounds very in-depth and very detailed, in as much as you have to get the startups to sit down with you and explain, this is what my technology is and this is how it impacts it. So there's this kind of process of, I guess, humanizing and putting it into layman's terms internally between you guys that are working with the startups before you can even begin to pitch this to the outside or communicate externally. This is what these startups are doing with these government entities. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. To explain a bit how we vet these applicants is, we have a partner that has tech experts from AI to blockchain and so on, who look at it whether what the company's proposes makes sense and is feasible and is plausible. We then, our team as a second stage, primarily looks at it, while what they propose, is this what the government entities are looking for? Because as mentioned earlier, we're looking for solutions based on specific requirements. For us, for example, we usually do not invite media until week 5 during the cohort, because only by then we really understand what do they do and how would it impact Dubai. And they also then understand Dubai at this point in time and how to communicate what they're doing.
5 weeks of breaking down what they do, what their tech is, and how it works in Dubai. That's intense. Is there such thing as a startup boom? And if so, where has it come from? Where has this obsession with startup culture come from in the last 10 years or so?
Well, that's a good question. And I think there's definitely a startup boom. In my mind, a very positive one, but that to a certain extent also something that should be reconsidered, how we approach that. Of course, like Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, Karim in Dubai, they all are the ones who spearheaded the excitement about startups, because it was very interesting for smart young people who graduate to join a startup, because they had the flexibility and they had this vision focused organization that really wanted to change the world. It was not just about making money anymore and increasing the profit. It was really about changing the world and building something meaningful. However, of course, there's a negative side towards it, and there have been quite a few posts and videos and articles, and especially in the last few months, given the pandemic, about rethinking that. We were kind of like glorifying unicorns for a very long time, and that's great. They have their own rights, of course. But the question is whether the focus on just scaling without looking at it on a sustainable way, and maybe also making sure that they're profitable.
Is there a call factor there? You've got a younger generation now going into the world with work. Startups are marketed and advertised in a certain way that kind of lends themselves to a more laid back working culture. Is that part and parcel of it?
I mean, what I know definitely, because as the generation right now, but also, quite a few, I assume quite a few people now that go through the pandemic are rethinking the impact they can make through their work, the day-to-day work. And I mean, we have seen even large corporations, adapting and putting in a pool table or a table-based table and allowing, remote work. So I think that also corporations are adopting, but I guess another reason why there's been a boom is because startups in most cases, and in my perspective, are the drivers of emerging tech.
Okay, so Karin, you have worked with over 250 startups from 37 countries in your time with Dubai Future Accelerators. For the successful startups that have been taken on by either a private company or a government entity, what has been the secret to success? Is there a common factor that you've noticed?
I mean, one hand, of course, goes down to does the product or service that the startup provide or can develop fit what the government is looking for, right? That's the very obvious one. And this is what is being further explored during the 9 weeks program. But one other thing that we always tell our startups from the beginning is that the business culture here is very much based on face-to-face meetings. So if you want to do business here, you need to consider spending time here and meeting your clients and your partners. And I think this is what we have seen from those who have benefited the most, is they actually have put in the time after the cohort as well. So I think what I noticed, though, when I started working in the startup scene, I noticed that there's a very common and almost monotonous picture that is being portrayed in media about entrepreneurs, and there's like Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs, so Ivy League college dropouts predominantly. But entrepreneurship has so many facets, and I have met a person who was a banker until his mid-50s and then set up his first startup. I have a lot of respect for everybody who embarks on the entrepreneurial journey, because it's not easy.
We mentioned in the intro how many of these startups don't make it all the way through to realizing their dreams and aspirations. And part of that is the work and the tireless hours that need to go into it. So any aspiring founder of the next unicorn, the next big business, may do well to listen to these words from the late Steve Jobs.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it and you don't really love it, you're going to give up. And that's what happens to most people, actually. If you really look at the ones that ended up being successful, unquote, in the eyes of society and the ones that didn't, oftentimes it's the ones that are successful loved what they did so they could persevere.
We're still here with Karin Gabriel, project lead at Dubai Future Accelerators at the Dubai Future Foundation. Karin, thanks so much for your thoughts and perspectives on startup culture and communicating them. That's the heavy business out of the way. Now we would like to get to know you a little bit better by throwing a few quick-fire questions at you. Are you up for that?
Sounds good, yes.
Fantastic. Let's do this. Okay. Very serious start. You ready? Fruits or vegetables?
Fruits.
Books or music?
Music.
Earliest childhood memory?
My earliest childhood memory was when my mom and I accompanied my dad, who was back then a truck driver, to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam. And this was the first time I rode an escalator. At least that's what I remember.
Takeout or home cooking?
Home cooking, although I am guilty of takeout every now and then.
The biggest difference for you between Austria and the UAE, apart from the climate?
Oh, I would have said that. I think the directness, as Austrians, we are very direct in our speech, in our approach, in our delegation, which I have experienced here in Dubai. You have to be a bit softer. So this was something that I had to learn at the beginning.
Okay. Instagram or TikTok?
Instagram.
No dance videos of TikTok or
No.
of you yet? The worst habit you've developed since working from home?
I don't think it's a bad habit. I think it's a funny habit. I started to name all of my plants. And yes, I did start speaking to my plants.
It does keep them happy, apparently.
Exactly, and it does keep me happy as well. So why not?
Oh, there you go. So it works both ways. Finally, if you could live the life of any other person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, I'm not sure if I would I think I would love to meet different people, but I don't think I would want to live their life, because I'm very happy with my life.
A lovely answer. Karin, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for having me.
Thanks for listening to Comms Life. For more episodes, you can download the Comms Life podcast from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep up to date with everything from the Comms Life team by following our social media pages on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Stay safe and be well.